Welcome to this webinar where we'll be introducing the mapping elements of the National Education Nature Park and sharing some of the resources and digital tools we've created to support you in doing this, even if you're completely new to mapping. Presenting today are myself, I'm Lucy Robinson from the Natural History Museum, and also Katie Hall from Esri UK, our mapping partner. You'll meet Katie a little bit later on. So as a brief reminder, the National Education Nature Park was set up in order to take real action to address biodiversity loss and also to increase young people's connection to nature and their sense of agency to take action in their own lives, bringing well-being benefits and developing the green skills for the future. The programme aims to involve every young person in England, in nurseries, schools or colleges, to study nature on their site and to be custodians of their site and to take action to enhance it. The total area that schools and colleges cover across England is twice the size of Birmingham, so there's a real significant land area there that can be enhanced and for young people to work on. Next slide, please. So our overall aim there is for young people to develop this connection to nature, to understand the threats it's facing and to feel able to do something about it. We have 4 core programme goals that are very closely interlinked: boosting biodiversity across the educational estate, developing green skills and supporting young people to take on pro-environmental behaviours and to yield the well-being benefits that come from spending time outdoors in nature. We're designing the programme such that young people can take the lead and are actively involved in all stages of the programme, so they really work collaboratively between educators and learners to study and enhance their site. The mapping tools we'll share today will enable you to track your progress and visualise this collective effort and collective achievement across the country. It's worth emphasising that this is for all schools, nurseries and colleges in England. You don't need a lot of outdoor space to take part, you don't need a lot of greenery to take part. In fact, greyer spaces have the greatest potential for biodiversity gains, so we're really excited to actually see what we can do in those very grey spaces to boost biodiversity. And you don't need to be confident in teaching climate or biodiversity. We understand these can be kind of scary or tricky subjects to teach. So the resources we create are there to support you through this process. We've designed a 5-step process, and the mapping resources we introduced to you today initially focus on step 1, understanding where we are now, understanding your starting point and exploring your space. And then later those same mapping tools will also support you to visualise and measure any increases of biodiversity you achieve on your site and where the changes are. Worked with 40 schools across Greater Manchester and the West Midlands to pilot this process and to pilot the engagement activities and the supporting resources, and the feedback from those schools, which we're super grateful for, have informed the wider programme. So thinking about that where are we now stage, I'll hand over to Katie and she'll tell you a little bit about why mapping can be a really useful teaching tool and approach, and to share some of the tools that you're going to be using. So over to you, Katie.
Thank you, Lucy, for introducing the Nature Park and the 5-step cycle there. I'm Katie and I work for the mapping partner on this project, that's Esri UK. So we provide digital mapping tools in the forms of apps for collecting and recording data, and maps and data visualisations for showing, understanding and analysing it. And we'll see some more of those in just a moment. But this digital mapping technology is known as GIS, Geographical Information Systems, and they're part of the national curriculum for geography in primary and secondary schools. Now, when I say digital maps, probably the first thing that most of us think about these days are Google Maps. And while navigation and finding places are absolutely part of digital mapping work, GIS is much more than this. I like to think of it as a technology that gives us a way of understanding and communicating about place, so of telling other people the stories about somewhere that's important to us. And thinking about GIS in this way helps explain why this project has a geospatial partner and why we're encouraging everyone to engage with these digital mapping tools wherever possible. Fundamentally, collecting and mapping data allows us to know where we started from, so we can actually measure change. If we turn concrete into wildflower meadows without recording what was there to start with, we won't know how much of a difference we're making. Putting things on a map also lets us see the change that we're making together, how lots of these tiny small changes all around the country add up to something much, much bigger collectively. And they also let us understand our sites in context. There's no point putting in an intervention like a bat box, for example, if there's no bat species that actually live in your area to use them. And knowing what else is nearby can help you provide wildlife corridors or select the most appropriate interventions for your local ecology. And as I mentioned, GIS is part of the national curriculum. All of our students have a statutory right to engage with this technology, and anyone that's met me kind of out there knows it's no secret I'm intensely passionate about ensuring every single one of our students does have access to it. So using the Nature Park mapping tools are one way that you can help them build key digital skills that can unlock rewarding and engaging careers and help them serve their communities in the future. These skills are in really high demand, particularly in the sustainability and environmental sectors. Next slide, please. So before I jump into a demonstration of the GIS tools available at this point in the project, I think that it's important that we take a moment to understand how you as professionals feel about using digital technology, particularly in an outdoor setting. For Nature Park to be successful, I think it's imperative that we meet you where you're starting from, and we recognise that there is intense variability across the education sector in terms of access to devices, our prior experiences with digital technologies, and our views on digital technology's role in our classrooms and nurseries and other settings. So this is about to be the audience participation part. If you have a mobile device on the desk next to you, you can scan the QR code that's on screen, or if you've got your computer open, you can pop along to menti.com on a web browser on your laptop and enter the code that's on the screen just there. I think there should be a direct link to the survey that's also going out in the Q&A box as well. So I'm just going to give you a moment to travel to menti.com, where you should be able to see my first question. Fab, so with a bit of luck, you should be able to see the same thing that I'm seeing now, which is our views on digital mapping tools and their role in this project. So my first question here then is to get a sense for the people on this call, how relevant do we think GIS and mapping technology is to fighting biodiversity loss, and how confident do you feel leading your students in using it? So I'm just going to give everyone a few moments to just pop themselves on that board there. I love kind of seeing the data points come in on these live update things. So it looks basically there's a broad mix, some of us not feeling very confident, not sure how relevant it is at all, but on average most of us feeling that yeah, it's quite relevant, but we're maybe not super confident yet in terms of using that technology. So if I take us through into the next question here, I just wanted to get a sense of what are your expectations if you've not really used digital tools before, or your prior experiences of using digital tools. Because I think it's really important to acknowledge where we're coming from with this. So on the screen in front of you, you should have the option to add in kind of a few words describing those expectations and experiences. And whenever I give these presentations, I always say, you know, at this point, it is an anonymous survey and I do have the profanity filter enabled. So please do give us your honest opinions on these ones. So I talk about using GIS in classroom context a lot, and I ask this question of people a lot. And I have to say that this is a pretty common word cloud. This is kind of what I tend to see the most, where challenging is often there in big letters, and things like nervous or a bit frustrating or I just don't have a lot of experience with this is pretty common. So I think we want to acknowledge that we know that's where a lot of you are starting from, and what we've tried to develop here is a really structured pathway to lead you step by step from, you know, somebody that's got very little experience all the way through to doing proper geospatial analysis in a GIS. And it's clear from our work with the Pathfinder schools that we need to start with a mapping tool that's as straightforward as possible to use, that clearly shows how digital tools can help with fostering nature connectedness rather than being a distraction from it, and that can work in settings where access to digital devices and computers are potentially challenging. Now that's quite a demanding set of requirements, but I'm going to take us over now to the Hidden Nature Challenge, which is, we hope, our kind of answer to those demands. If you haven't had a chance to participate in Hidden Nature already, the challenge is still open and anyone can join in, and here's how it works. So I've just got it loaded up on my screen here, which you guys should be able to see, and it immediately drops you into being able to add a record. So if you've got location services enabled on your device, it will automatically pop a pin on the map where it thinks you're standing. You can also do a bit of searching if you want to find a particular place, and then you select from the options what it is that you found, what piece of hidden nature you've encountered. And when you click on one of these, you'll see it will give you a little prompt. It will check that this is what you think it is, and you can add some additional contextual information as well. So I found something new to me today, something that I've never noticed before. And the next thing that I want to add here is a picture of it. So if I'm doing this on my digital device itself, I can click on the camera and I can use a phone or a tablet camera to take that picture. Or if I've been out in advance and taken some photos like I have today, I just click on this button and then I can go and select the photo that I've taken earlier to add it into our survey here. So this is some bracket fungus that I noticed when I was out walking my dog earlier. That was something new to me in my local woods. And then there's just a little bit of additional prompting here that's really to get students to reflect on that nature. This isn't just a quick, like, take the picture and run. This is actually, we want them to take that moment to really consider what it is about this that made them notice it, how it made them feel, and what they think about that discovery in terms of sharing it. And there's slightly different prompts depending on what it is you found. So if your students go out across a site and find several things, there's a couple of different ways of reflecting on it that they can see. Once I've filled all of that in, and these prompts are optional, so I don't have to fill those in if they're kind of not appropriate for the group that you're working with, you click on Add to Your Map, and that gets sent into the map. There is a kind of safeguarding team that does have an overview of these when they're added. So they check for things like student spaces, any inappropriate images. So there's a minor delay before it gets added live to the map, just for that level of safeguarding. But if I take us over to this map tab, you can start to see what that map looks like. So here are all of the hidden nature discoveries that have been made so far. If I'm just interested in a particular kind, I can click on the little pie chart here. So now I'm only looking at where people found something new to me. If I click on it again, it will take me back to the view of everything. And I can zoom in on particular areas of interest. So I'm from the West Midlands, so I quite often find myself zooming in around Birmingham and seeing what people have been looking at. And if I click on any of the individual points on this map as well, I can find out more about what was found there. And if I click on the photos, it will bring up some information about what that person found in that particular area. Fab. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now for a second, and I'm going to switch back to the slideshow. So Hidden Nature Challenge works on any digital device that can connect to the internet. We also have an offline version where students can collect observations on paper and facilitators can take photos and upload their findings from a desktop, just as I showed in my little demonstration there. With this app, we're wanting students to get used to using devices like iPads or mobile phones as tools rather than toys, showing that they can be formidable pieces of scientific equipment in a citizen science experiment. And the feedback from our Pathfinders has been really encouraging about this, that actually students taking time to take a really great photo of their finding is helping them sort of zoom into nature rather than detracting from their engagement with it. And the map also showed us this collective element of Nature Park working, how we can see where our results were, how they might compare and contrast to other people's, whether we match that national picture or whether we have a different kind of story that's taking place on our site. Those clickable elements, like the pie chart that I clicked on, help students begin to use very simple analytic techniques like filtering data to better understand patterns of distribution, and the kinds of outputs that GIS produce, like these dashboards, what they look like in comparison to paper-based resources. So it's going to depend a lot on your context, how this kind of output is most appropriate to use, whether it's something that you're going to lead young people through from the front of a classroom, or whether it's something that they can start to explore for themselves on their own device. And we're always interested in hearing from you about the ways it works in your context so that we can share best practice. So if you're someone who has already had a chance to use Hidden Nature Challenge already, please do share your story so that other folks can learn from you, as many have done on social media already. And next slide, please. So Hidden Nature helps prepare your students for creating your site boundary and mapping habitat. These digital apps for these tasks work in very similar ways. They're also kind of using mapping apps that both, there's also mapping apps that you and your students can use to examine microclimate, environmental quality and shade if you're wanting to take this kind of activity further, or if you're looking for something with a strong geography curriculum connection, for example. The next step on from these simple apps is the Habitat Mapper app, which works again in a really similar way. So first of all, I take the phone app out onto my site and I add data out in the field. And with Habitat Mapper, I can add point data, line data and polygon data. Let me show you what I mean by that. So if we can click play on the little recording here, you should be able to see a screen recording of me on my iPhone from earlier. I will say I happen to be using an iPhone, but it will work on other devices, including Android ones as well. So in this first example, I'm just adding a little piece of point data. I'm adding the location of a bug hotel in my setting. So I just select this from the little drop-down list of options and I hit on that add point and it puts a little dot on my map and I hit submit and that sends my data through to the map. So you can see I got the little tick for submitted there and the insect hotel is now marked on my map. The next thing that I'm going to do is add a line feature. So in this case here, I'm adding a hedge line at the edge of my setting. So this is, the next step on where I have to click multiple times to be able to add the full length of the line that I'm interested in. And every time I click, it lets me change direction. So if my shape isn't exactly straight, I can go around corners and things like that, as you can see me doing here. Again, once I'm happy with that, I tap that submit button and you can see it sends that through to the map as well. And finally, I'm going to outline an area of ground with no plants on my setting. This is hard standing in the setting in my case. And this is what I mean by polygon data, because I'm actually going to draw a shape here using the dots. So I come and I do one corner and I'm going to bring that down across that area of hard standing and fill in the whole of that shape. And again, once I've got to where I'm happy with the outline of that shape, I tap that submit button and that has been sent through to the dashboard as well. Next slide, please. So once that data is collected, it's passed through to a dashboard so we can explore our findings just like we did for the Hidden Nature Challenge, and where we can start to see the National Education Nature Park actually taking shape. And in just a moment, Lucy is going to outline how we can engage our young people in one of the largest citizen science activities ever undertaken in this country to work out what habitat types are actually present on site for you to map like this. I just need to tell you first that, like Hidden Nature Challenge, I can also access my map on the computer through the Habitat Map Editor. This means that if there's changes or updates to be made after a phase of data collection in the field, I can do that from the warm and dry of my own classroom or staff room. Editor does what it says on the tin. It doesn't allow me to add new data, but I can edit or delete data that's previously been collected out in the field on the mobile devices. And Habitat Mapper and Habitat Map Editor are both intended for use by teachers or other staff rather than students. Probably the best way to think of them is like a digital clipboard collecting the data that your citizen scientists are investigating in the field. There is also a Habitat Map Viewer app for students, which will allow them to see this data on their own device and add notation on top of that if they wish. That data won't be passed through to the dashboards, however, as we need a single view on the truth, rather than potentially hundreds of different habitat maps all of the same place produced by all of those students. And that is it from me, so I'm going to hand over again and say back over to you, Lucy.
Thanks so much for introducing all that, Katie. That gave you a really nice snapshot of what the apps actually look like. So as you start in your nature park journey and you want to understand that starting point, this important step is understanding what habitats your site has. So before you start thinking about what animals are living on your site, we want to understand what homes and resources your site offers for wildlife. And this includes mapping grey spaces of tarmac and fences, as well as greener spaces of grass or flowers or hedges. I'll show you in a moment some of the resources that will support you in mapping those habitats. We've divided it up into 8 chunks. So, for example, you can explore all of the grass and wildflower habitats together, then all the tree-related habitats, then all the water habitats like ponds and ditches and rain gardens. So you can pick off a chunk at a time. Some sites might have all 8 of these different habitat categories, but many won't, and you can pick and choose whatever's relevant to your site. So on the Nature Park website, there's a preparation section. That includes a planning tool, which helps you to decide which sets of resources are relevant to your site and plan how to schedule it into your school day, and also give you some tips on practicing with the Habitat Mapper app and getting comfortable with it before leading a lesson. You then choose one of these 8 habitat categories, and we provide activities and resources to help you and your learners to identify the habitats. You work your way through the different habitat categories over, for example, a half term or a term, or you might prefer to put it all within an intensive week of activity if you prefer. It's flexible, so you can adapt it to meet your needs. And then finally, once you've mapped all your habitats, we really want you to celebrate this milestone and reflect on what's been achieved, what you've learned about your site, and that feeds into your next step of planning for change. If you haven't already, before you start mapping any habitats, you need to create your site boundary. This takes less than half an hour. It means that any information that you collect going forward will be associated with your school or nursery. And so you'll build your own record of what's living on your site, and you'll be able to explore those data in future. Next slide, please. As I said before, mapping your site includes both human-made and natural spaces, and the app that Katie was just showing you, the Habitat Mapper app, allows you to add these areas like a patch of grass. Katie showed us how you add a long, thin habitat like a hedge as a line, and also individual points for features like bird boxes. This shows a little snapshot of some of the resources that we'll be creating for you, and I'm now going to talk you through just a couple of these to explain how it might work within a lesson. So for tree habitats, like you might have just one tree on your site, you might have a little cluster of fruit trees, a couple of trees scattered around your boundary, or you might be lucky enough to have a little piece of woodland. There's a couple of activities here, Meet a Tree and the Tree Survey, that help learners to understand some of the key concepts, like the age of a tree, whether it's deciduous or evergreen, and practicing close observation skills through drawing a leaf, or for younger years that can be a leaf rubbing. And then your learners can examine some trees on site and use this knowledge to answer the questions on the flowchart. So for each habitat, created a flowchart that leads you to a particular habitat, and you as the educator then work with learners to add this to your map. So as Katie said, that digital clipboard, you've got the app, and together with your learners you add it onto the map. In the top right of the flowchart, there's a little key that tells you whether this is a point, a line, or an area on the app, so you know which options to click into. On the next slide, we're showing the activities for flower beds or food growing areas that you might have on site. And the activity here helps learners to think about whether plants are wild or cultivated, whether they're grown intentionally for humans to eat, whether wildlife eats them or whether we share. And again, then the flowchart helps learners to determine what habitat you've got, and you can work together to add it to the map. I mentioned that this process also includes tarmac and gravel and ground without plants. So we also have a suite of activities that support learners to explore concepts around permeability, whether water soaks in when they pour it on the ground, whether it flows or drains away, concepts of natural and non-natural materials that your ground might be made from, and what bare ground is made from. Is it wood chip? Is it a natural material that was once living? Is it soil or sand, or is it rock? So again, the activities scaffold learners towards completing the flowchart, and you work together to add it to your map. So there are 8 sets of these flowcharts and associated activities, and you can pick and choose what's relevant to your site and spread it out over a period of sessions so that you gradually map your site. I hope you can see how these resources support you in this first step of the process of understanding your starting point, which is so crucial to be able to measure change. You need to know where you started in order to be able to evidence that you've gained biodiversity and boosted nature on your site. And that allows you also to visualize and celebrate your achievements. Once you know your starting point, you can move through the next stages of the program to start planning and making changes to enhance your site. Finally, let me leave you with 3 things that you can do right now to get started. If you haven't already, please create your site boundary on the map, so you set out the area that you'll be working in. You can find this on the website resources section, and also on your dashboard when you're logged in. Secondly, you can go to the App Store and download the Field Maps app. This is the app that will power the habitat mapping apps that you've just been looking at. You can download that onto any school devices that you might use. And finally, take a look at the website where all the instructions and support and resources on mapping your site can be found, and start getting familiar with that. If you need any support, you can contact us at this email address. And thanks very much for your time watching today. Thank you.